This is the M40 United States Colonial Marine Grenade from Spat Cave Studios, with a modification I did, adding a spent shotgun primer. So this is how it comes from Spat Cave, straight out of the cast. It's considered a kit, and that's the finished product. So we're going to show you a 12-step process to go from what we get from Spat to what I make. Now when it comes from Spat, it's got a leftover casting and some bubbling up material coming on here. So the first thing I do is take some 60 grit sandpaper. Not that we need 60 grit, I happen to have some on hand. And I'm going to grind off that edge and all that junk and actually take the bubbles off and take off some of that material. We come on down to this shell, which still has a bit of a rough surface on the head. So I'm going to come on in with some 220. I'm going to smooth that out, and actually coming in at an angle and kind of give it a little bit of a beveled edge to that head, and make sure all the edges are gone from the rimmed casing, and leave that smooth. Spat recommends using quadruple zero steel wool. So that's what I use. I had mixed results until I finally just used a lot of force. And I came in here and twisted and ground and getting that resin off to show the aluminum powder inside, and it really gives a nice shine. And if you use a lot of force, you end up getting little rings, little marks. It looks like it's actually been through a lathe, like these are tool marks. So we go from the more bland, flat resin color to the semi-gloss shine of the aluminum. It actually looks really pretty. Hopefully you can see that on the camera at the light here. From that, I went ahead and colored the bottom here. Now I don't use paint because paint can flake off and chip, so I use metallic silver Sharpie. I don't know if there's oil in here or paint, but it'll come off sometimes, so I let that sit for maybe like a few days or a week before I take any further steps. Most people would consider that done, but I've got to go a few steps farther. Attention to detail, make the props look a little more realistic. Grab a nail or any really sharp thing and center punch a hole best you can. If it's a little off, don't worry, we can fix that with the consecutive drilling. So I start with a 1/16 inch drill bit, and I drill a pilot hole, and that's what we get from the start. And if you're a little off, you can still kind of fix this on the consecutive drills. So I come back with maybe 5/64, 3/32, drill another hole a little bit deeper, and I'll come back again, maybe 9/64 or 1/8, and drill another hole before I finally get ready to drill the larger hole, where it's 15/64. The depth isn't too important because the primer's only going to squeeze in so far, but I went ahead and taped this off just so I'm not over drilling everything, and I make sure to get the hole deep enough. From there, take a Swiss Army knife, or any good knife you have on hand, and I take about 2 millimeters to 1.5 millimeters off at a 45-degree angle to make room for that shoulder of the spent primer. So when you tap it in, it'll actually be set flush or a little bit on the inside. But that's not quite enough, so I'll come in at a deeper angle and cut it again and keep checking it. Make sure that the shoulder of that primer is going to sit nice and snug. And even though it's not drilled or countersunk, which I've had some troubles with because sometimes the drill bit would catch and over drill, so that's why it resulted down to using a knife to cut that. So it's resident and will give. So when I set that on some wood, put that primer in, and I'll just tap and push that primer right in, and that's where we get the finished product. And you're like, well, what am I going to get spent primers? I don't reload. I'm not going to buy a live primer and put it in there or spend it somehow. But getting a shotgun primer out, it really isn't that difficult. We can do that right here. I'm going to put some wood down, put some gloves on. It's a little bit rough, but all you really need is a large nail. So something like that. So I found that Federal has silver on silver primers, and these look pretty good for color wise to put in these props. So you take your nail, you get it on the primer, make sure it's centered. All you gotta do is hit it kind of hard, maybe once or twice, and then you get your spent primer.